Okay.
Okay, welcome everybody. We're convening our Racial Justice Committee of the Sierra Curtis Neighborhood Association. And we have two guests with us this morning. The first will be Captain Dan Monk. He's the area captain that includes Curtis Park. And a little bit later in the program, we'll be having our new police chief, Chief Kathy Lester. Just a reminder that a couple of us will be taking notes. So if you see heads down, like you will with Mimi in particular, and Eric, and sometimes myself, that does not mean that we're tuning out. It only means that we're looking down to make our notes. We do have a list of prepared questions for both Captain Monk and Chief Lester, and Bruce Perini of our committee is going to be addressing those questions. But just real briefly, if I can be brief, Captain Monk, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on us. Our Racial Justice Committee has been in existence. This is our third year now. And one of the things that we have been particularly interested in is police reform and police issues by way of certain things that have happened in Sacramento. We have met with the representatives or members of the Police Advisory Commission. We've met with our own council person, or our previous council person, Jay Chenier. In conjunction with that, we've written a few letters to the city council. But first and foremost, we're not just advocating for police reform. We are a group who tries to enlighten ourselves with the issues from all around perspectives, including that of the police officers and police department. And that is why we have you and Chief Lester here today. So the focus is somewhat on racial justice issues, but not exclusively. And whatever Bruce asks you, you answer in whatever manner you feel fit to do. And welcome again.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you, all of you.
Bruce.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And thank you, Captain Dan Monk, for being here this morning and giving us generously of your time and answering questions mostly that aren't really easy. They're probably not at your fingertips. So we understand you know that you may not have all the answers that I ask. First one is about a breakdown. If you can give us some kind of breakdown of the changes in crime rate up or down for the Curtis Park area over the past few years. Let's start with that question. Is it up? Is it down? Does it depend? We're talking about violent crimes in this case.
Well, I apologize. I wasn't aware that we were going to be discussing that specific data this morning, so I don't have those at my fingertips. But I think I would talk more broadly about violent crime, and I can talk about it in the South area, and I think probably the city as a whole. And last year we saw some significant increases in shootings, and our department seizing illegally possessed firearms. And so I know Chief Lester, she'll probably talk about it when she comes on in a few minutes, but she's made it a priority for our department to address that through a variety of ways. And we're going to do it in a manner that is more respectful, I think, than in generations of law enforcement leaders in the past. This certainly isn't going to be the war on drugs in the 80s, where if we had a particular crime issue in a neighborhood, say violent crime, for example, where we would put a bunch of police officers in that neighborhood, ask them to go out and stop cars and get guns off the streets. But in the meantime, you're negatively impacting the residents of that community, because not everybody in that neighborhood or community are criminals, and they're certainly not out necessarily doing anything wrong, but they're inconvenienced. And certainly the perception is that the police department may be out there doing things inappropriately. And so under Chief's direction, we're going to have a multifaceted approach to our response this year. One of it is looking at the offenders, individuals that have been involved in multiple incidents, and sort of looking at what's the cause of that. Certainly not just from a criminal justice perspective, but from the perspective of our community-based organizations, and how do we get those individuals out of their lifestyle. So we'll be looking at contacting them with some of our community groups, and in a sense trying to wrap our arms around that individual, if they're willing to try and get them out of that lifestyle. And so that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is geographically based. So when we look at the data, and this was a heavy data lift for our crime analysis unit, but essentially we've identified a couple different spots in the city last year that were significant amounts of violent crime occurred. And they're not in your neighborhood. They're at least for like South Command, for example, the area of Mackin Center was our hotspot. And so as we look at sort of taking a deeper dive as to what's going on at Mackin Center, really having a multi-pronged approach to it. Part of that will be reaching out to the community members there and saying, you know, what's going on in your neighborhood? How can the police department or the city help what is going on in your area, so that we're able to try and reduce the impacts there. We will do that in conjunction with community-based organizations who will be able to you know, help us as we look at contacting our community and saying, hey, what is going on there? What can we help with? What resources do the city and other nonprofits have that we can sort of change the environment out there, right? So we look at things from like a CEPTED perspective. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Crime prevention through environmental design. Mm-hmm. So as we look at what's going on in that particular region, and there'll be other spots as well, you know, we look at things like what's the environment there? Are there opportunities to, you know, help individuals before the crime occurs? And then, you know, what other ways can we work with our community-based organizations, city council, everybody in the city to try and change the environment there so that we're, you know, we're not seeing the violence that we had before. And not only that, but asking them, you know, this is a community issue. How would you like to see the police department respond to this? You know, certainly enforcement will be a piece of this tool. And as we do that, we try to be more strategic about it. You know, we have a lot more tools at our disposal than like when I was a newer officer. Like our officers today, we have the internet and social media and things that we can monitor of individuals that are pretty, you know, outward with some of their criminal activities. And so we start focusing on those individuals and being more precise and specific on the individuals that we're targeting. And then once, you know, we, again, getting back to those individuals, when we do arrest them, we look and say, hey, you know, what's going on in your life? How do we help you get your resources? How do we help try to get you out of this lifestyle? And so it's really a multi-pronged approach. It's not something that's gonna, you know, probably occur overnight, but it's something that we're working towards and building to. And I think you'll probably see, you know, our department coming out with something here probably later this month or early next month.
Okay, thank you. It almost sounds like part of the police, the efforts of the police are going to be partly social work or community work. And that sounds really positive. Thank you. It's only anecdotal evidence, but anybody reading Nextdoor over the course of, you know, several months at least, has seen a lot of package thief, people on camera, people complaining. It seems to be pretty common on Nextdoor. What about property crimes? Are they, do you know, increasing, and or maybe package porch package thefts themselves increasing?
Well, I would say that, you know, as you know, sir, the data we have is only as good as what's reported to us. I love Nextdoor. It's a great way for us to communicate with our neighbors. But as you may or may not know, unless there's a conversation or a post that we post, we cannot see those. That's designed so that there's, you know, community members have a layer of comfort that, you know, the police department or the government is not monitoring what's being said on there. And so a lot of times, unless somebody from the community lets me know that there's some concerns, I don't know about it. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, the same goes with the reporting of the porch pirates, so to speak. Unless we know about it, then we don't necessarily address it. You know, in years past, it certainly has been an issue, and it's really something that kicks off. We see the biggest trend around the holidays. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of folks that are shopping, particularly the last couple of years with the pandemic, where a lot of us were using online services to shop rather than going into retail stores who were closed. And so, I think anecdotally that we did see an increase in that. And I try to be really creative when we problem solve for those things. And so one of the tools that we have is they're called bait packages, where we went out and we purchased little mini like GPS tags, and we get like Amazon boxes, or we get Apple boxes, or things that are sort of popular items and expensive items that are popular to steal. And we partner with community members who are willing to allow us to put a bait package on their porch. And so what happens is we will partner with that community member. We will deploy the package on their porch and say, hey, don't touch it, just let it be there. And, quite, I wouldn't say regularly, but pretty often, somebody will steal the package. When that happens, it notifies our communication center that the package is on the move. They notify our officers of the GPS coordinates. The officer drives over there. We detain the individual, and ultimately they get arrested for theft. Mm-hmm. So it's been a very successful program. We had a lot of bait packages out around the holidays. We made some great arrests on it. One individual I can think of, they had multiple packages in their car. They were from another city in the county, and they were probably doing package thefts for a significant period of time, and we were able to retrieve and return some property to the individuals that had it stolen. We had another one recently where the individual was in possession of a bunch of stolen mail. So we realized that at face value, that one little package is may not be the biggest arrest of the day, but all in all, we identify who is doing these type of behaviors, and we can try to focus our efforts on that. And also we're not shy about it. So we publicize that we're doing this, and hopefully that any individuals who are considering engaging in this type of behavior know that there's a risk that they could be stealing a police department package, and they may deter some of that behavior.
Okay, very good, thank you.
I just want to interrupt. Dan, you saw me taking some pictures with my photo. Since we're not with you in person, and if our neighborhood newspaper wants to have a photo like they usually do, this is the best I can do for them. So that was why I was clicking.
That's okay. I hope you got my good side.
I did. You look great.
Dan, while we're
Yeah.
breaking in, if I could just clarify with you, you mentioned back a while the hot spot in the south area, and I was not familiar with what you were saying. I got Mac and Center. What is
sorry,
it?
it's Mac Road and Center Parkway.
Ah, thank you.
So we did,
Okay.
sort of a significant analysis of that was for 2021, and looking at, the gun violence in our area, and that for little micro area was the south area's the hot spot, so to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not saying, and we're not saying that this is the case, but we hear that more crime follows homelessness. Does the data bear that out with higher crime rates, for example, near the X Street Navigation Center or the homeless encampment at the west end of Broadway?
That is a great question, and it's a really difficult one to answer. I get asked a lot if homelessness equates to more crime, and it's really difficult to answer because I don't want to stigmatize our homeless individuals and our homeless camps to say that all homeless people are criminals, or that if you have a homeless camp in your area, you're going to have more crime. And so, but you have to look at it, from sort of a holistic perspective. And when you look at just the X Street spot, for example, is just outside of my area. So I don't have a lot of specific data on that particular spot, but certainly the west end of Broadway is within my purview. So, as we look at some of these homeless camps, there's a few things you have to consider in that there's more people in an area that weren't previously there. So if you see an increase in crime, that could be a part of it. It's a struggle in that we can't forget that, homeless people are people. And as they're out there on the streets, certainly they are victimized as well. We see that homeless people, obviously they're out there in a tent or on the sidewalk, and they don't have a lot of protection out there. We also see that occasionally homeless people do commit crimes as well. And so there is that as well. And then the other thing is, I think we have to think about is, what are the underlying causes of homelessness? And there's a lot of them. And one of them certainly is that individuals often struggle with addiction and or mental illness, or they have co-occurring disorders. And so certainly there is an aspect of the drug use that's out there, and sort of the behaviors that that causes as well. And so it is difficult to say the yes or no that an increase in homeless camps will bring an increase in crime. But I would say, if I had to really drill down, probably maybe a little bit. But certainly, I don't know that there's enough data out there to really suggest one way or another, or point to sort of the root causes of what's going on. Certainly, when we have crimes around those areas, we look at what's going on, and surprisingly, it's not always what you think it is. And so we certainly try to have an open mind as we're looking at some of those things, and looking at how we can impact those numbers. And so it really is a difficult really thing to measure, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, thank you. I've got a follow-up. If there is crime around homeless camps, what kinds are they? Are they property crimes? Are they interpersonal violence crimes, or drug use crimes? Do you have a read on the kinds of crimes that one might find if there is an increase?
Well, I think, if you want to talk about, week to week or month to month, or just sort of my anecdotal knowledge going back several years, I used to oversee our impact team. And then when Chief Hahn was here, he tasked me with trying to set up our mental health team. So I was very involved in our homeless outreach. And, over the years that I saw everything from a homeless woman being murdered to, everything else, basically, you see things that they're victims of crime. You see, drug usage. There's a variety of things that can occur in some of the homeless camps. But, again, without saying, trying to stigmatize our homeless folks, it's sort of difficult to answer to say, whether or not there is an increase, because I don't know. It's really hard to measure.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a question. Ginger, do you want to ask a question?
Captain, I'm wondering, since you followed the homeless issue for a long time, to what extent do you think changes in mental health laws, the ability to treat people who are resistant to treatment, for example, how would that, in your view, impact our homeless problem? Or more facilities for the mentally ill?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I appreciate it, because I can, to tell you're kind of looking at what the root causes of what it is. And I'll, when you really try to drill down at homelessness, and you look at what are the root causes of what are causing folks to be out there, and then how do you address those things? And so, when Prop 47 was enacted, that was a significant change for our business and sort of how we dealt with drugs on the street. So before Prop 47, if an individual was in possession of just a little bit of drugs, that was a felony. And that was significant because they would go to jail, and they could be looking at up to a year or more in prison. And so I don't know that anybody, including myself, think that it's right that somebody would go to prison for that long because they had a little bit of drugs on them. But what it did is it gave the district attorney's office the ability to say, hey, look, we want you to go get clean and go to a treatment center, or you could be facing prison time. And so anecdotally, I heard that, there was a lot more success rate in having individuals get help from getting off the streets when they're addicted to drugs when it was a felony. So now drugs are a misdemeanor because of Prop 47. So when our officers come across an individual on the street who may or may not be homeless, and they're in possession of drugs, they get a ticket. So, and they get a ticket and they get sent on their way, right? So then they're out there to continue to use. They probably will miss a court date if the case gets filed. Eventually it will go to a warrant, but it's a misdemeanor warrant. And as police officers, we have a limited capacity to serve misdemeanor warrants versus felony warrants. So let's say they do get arrested on their warrant, they're out before the district attorney's office has the ability to speak with them. And essentially they are sort of faced with either maybe a few weeks or a month in jail, or they can go to a 4-month treatment program and get treatment. And again, anecdotally, I hear that it's a struggle to get individuals interested in treatment because it's easier to go, do a few weeks or time served in county jail. So I circle back with, if we have a lot of individuals who are on the streets who are suffering from mental illness and or drug addiction, and they don't know that they have an issue or there's no mechanism in place to get them help. So how do we do that? And so I think you're absolutely right and spot on. And we look at our mental health system and we look at how do we get individuals who are living on the streets help? I have an uncle when I was a newer officer who was homeless and he was addicted to methamphetamine out here. And you look at individuals who are suffering like that, and in my perspective, it's not always the most humane to let individuals live like that. And so how as a community and as a society, as a country, are we going to deal with that? And so, you look at the existing mental health abilities that we do have. And as a police officer, we do have the ability to place somebody on a temporary hold for a few days to get them assessed and get help. But our abilities to do that when an individual is able to care for themselves is limited. And the capacity or the threshold that we have to meet to basically take away their personal freedoms and say that you're not able to care for yourself is a really bar high for us to get to. And then when we do get to that bar, and if they are suffering from addiction in addition to mental illness, it's very hard for the providers to say within 72 hours what they're suffering from and to get them treatment and to be able to facilitate that. And then, you look at the next level up of, well, if we have individuals who are in need of help, is there the capacity in the county system to get them help immediately? And I don't know that, I can't speak for the county, but I don't know that, capacity levels are what they could be or they should be. And so it's a very complex issue. And I know that there's a lot of buy-in and a lot of individuals that are, trying to help, from our county elected and our city elected, and everybody's trying to work together to solve this issue. But at the end of the day, it's very complex, and it's just one of the many facets of what causes individuals to be homeless, and something that I think is probably one of the problems of our time, and something that as a group here we need to figure out how we can do better.
Wait a minute, in London Breed in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, has proposed that if somebody is taken in on a 5250 3 times or within a period of time, that they be held until their mental health problem is resolved or that they're stabilized. Do we need to do something like that in Sacramento? Get people, holding people for 72 hours doesn't solve any problem. You release them, they're still mentally ill and they're still wandering the streets and they're still causing chaos. Is there a law change that we need to hold these individuals for a longer period of time if we've had multiple times they've been taken in because they're mentally ill?
Well, I'm not familiar with what San Francisco is trying to do, but I do think we need to take a hard look at the mental illness laws that we have on the books, and then what changes can be made. And then you look at, let's say we do, or there is a law enacted where somebody has to be held. What does that look like? Who has the capacity to do that? What type of facility would they be held in? Where would they be held at? There's a lot of sort of downstream effects that we have to think about when we consider legislative changes, and what's that going to look like? Who's going to fund it? And those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, we can't just, in my opinion, sort of let things be as they are. We have a significant problem in our community. A lot of individuals need our help, and we have to do something.
Okay, thank you. I've got a further question from one of the members here. Do cannabis dispensaries attract crime, such as break-ins of the dispensaries, robberies of dispensary delivery drivers, and then increased crime in surrounding neighborhood? Is that a phenomenon that you can comment on?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we don't have a lot of cannabis locations in the South area. We do have some in this, in the city. From my limited perspective, we don't have a lot of issues there. Occasionally we'll have some burglaries that occur during the nighttime hours where individuals will try and break in and steal a product or if they have any money on site. But, we're not seeing a whole host of, robberies or, those type of issues. And, from what I've been able to see, there's very little impact on the communities around them. We have one actually just right around the corner from our station. And the biggest impact that I see is traffic for people coming in and out of there on Fruit Ridge. But with that, though, I think a lot of that has to do with the pre-planning that goes into those facilities. The city has a pretty significant SEPTED requirements for them so that we can try to minimize any crime afterwards. Things like the cameras and security, they have to have locks that are, pretty hard to get into so folks aren't breaking in there. It's, pretty regulated in that sense. So, so far, we haven't seen a whole lot of impact on crime in those neighborhoods where they're at. And I hope that continues.
Okay, thank you very much. Chief Lester has just arrived, and Kathy, I'm going to leave it to you to see if there are more questions from the group to Dan Monk or to introduce Kathy Lester.
Well, yeah, if she's here, I think we should move on. If anyone has questions, put them in the chat and we'll see if we can get back to them. Dan, are you staying here throughout the chief's presentation as well?
I will be here, and I just wanted to let the chief know if she wasn't aware that this is being recorded.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell her that too,
as
yeah.
well.
Okay, great.
There was a little bubble that popped up, and I'm sorry I'm joining the meeting late. It sounds like you guys have already talked to Captain Monk, our wonderful South Area captain. What topics have you touched on? So I make sure I don't duplicate work here.
Okay, so Kathy, before you get into that, I want to officially introduce you and let you know about a little coincidence and then tell you who you're looking at in the screen. I am the co-chair, and this is our Racial Justice Committee of the Sierra Curtis Neighborhood Association. This is our 3rd year of existence. We obviously focus on racial justice issues. We've done a lot around the police department about the, and I never get the name right, but the Police Advisory Commission with their kind of funny convoluted name. The coincidence is that my name is Kathy Less.
I saw, and I thought that was me, and I had it typed in right.
Yeah, so I'm LES, and I've never come across anyone with a name as close to mine as yours is. So I hope there's not going to be too much confusion going forward, but if I get any of your emails, I'll be sure to pass them along to you and vice versa. So with that, who you are looking at is largely our Sierra Curtis Neighborhood Curtis Park Board of Directors. We do have a few additional people not on the board who are also on our Racial Justice Committee. We have a really active website portion on our umbrella website for our neighborhood association. And a couple things are going to be happening to notify you about in advance. One is we'll be doing a story for our neighborhood newspaper. I'll be writing that. And I'll be taking your picture online in a few minutes. So just be aware of that. And then we are also recording the meeting so that we can post this on our website and direct people to it who might like to listen.
Great. I can send you a good picture unless you want my Zoom picture, but let me know what you.
Yeah, I mean, sure. A Zoom picture might be kind of fun because it shows how we conducted the meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'll take both a picture of the whole group and then one of just you. But if you want to send us a picture too, that would be great. And we're really excited to have you here. We know this has not been an easy launch as police chief. After your stellar career and the national search and all of the excitement about having our first woman police chief, and then right out of the box, you have this huge, huge thing to deal with. And I wanted to express, I don't know what I can express. The best thing I can think of to say is that when something like that happens in our community, it happens to all of us. When we look for causes, I think we are all the cause in some way. And we're interested to hear what you have to say about that, but also about things along a racial justice line. So our questionnaire will be Bruce Perini. He's on the, Bruce, just raise your hand if you would. He'll be asking the questions. My co-chair is Mimi Budd. If you raise your hand, Mimi. She'll be taking notes, and then in additionally, myself and Eric, raise your hand, are taking notes. This is what we do around here. We take a lot of notes so we don't forget. So if you see our heads down writing, it doesn't mean that we're tuning out or not interested. It means that we're writing furiously on our pads, all the things that you say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here in light of the past couple of weeks.
No, it's really nice to see everyone. I know it's been really busy, but I certainly didn't want to miss this opportunity. I know we've had it scheduled for a long time. So I have had to cancel, unfortunately, a number of events, but I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Okay, so take it away, Bruce.
Okay, let's see. Chief Lester, you asked what we had already discussed with Dan Monk. We discussed crime such as, well, crime rates, and Dan talked about, Sacramento, South Sacramento generally over the past few years, property crimes a bit, especially, porch thief activity, which anecdotally by reading next door is quite an issue. Also, we asked about homelessness and if crime follows these homeless camps like our navigation center on 29th and X or West Broadway. And also we asked about cannabis dispensaries, if that invites in some ways crime by way of, theft of materials or holding up the delivery drivers. So those were the major things that I can think of that we discussed.
Okay, great.
Okay. Well, my first question, it has a little bit of a lead to it. It's from Mimi. City Manager Howard Chan has said that during the 27-year tenure you have with the Sacramento Police Department, you've demonstrated an unwavering commitment to diversity, equity, accountability, and innovation. For example, you were responsible for establishing programs to increase diversity, implementing gender awareness training, and disproportionate minority contact and implicit bias training for all officers.
Yep.
And for creating a division to expand community outreach efforts to multiple ethnic groups. How do you anticipate that your concern for diversity and equity will impact your tenure and impact the community?
Thank you for asking that. A lot of people want to know what you're going to get with your new police chief. And so I've been really clear about talking about how proud I am of the progress that we have made as an agency. And I don't believe that reform and evolution is exclusive from enforcement and the efforts that we need to make to keep our community safe. What I will say is that we've been dedicated as a department for a long time, specifically to diversity and equity. And it's a challenge right now for sure with all professions to recruit and retain good employees. I was watching the nightly news the other day, and they were saying that there are 5 million more jobs in the United States than there are eligible candidates. And when you listen to what other challenges we're facing, like in the truck driving industry, Walmart, which owns its own truck driving company, they're increasing the salary, offering bonuses just to try and get a qualified pool of applicants. And so for us, it's been a real challenge as well. And I think some of that comes on the heels of a number of things. Number one, it's really challenging to be a police officer in today's environment. Everything you do is really scrutinized to a level that's not really prevalent or doesn't really exist in other professions. And that's certainly not a detractor from the profession, but over the last few years, especially, I think it has been a challenge for people wondering if this is the profession that they want to enter, despite the fact that you can do an incredible amount of good, I think. What I saw happening here, and actually I'll back up a little bit, I think that we've done a great job with diversity and with inclusion. And I cite myself as an example, right? I mean, who would hire a high school dropout just out of the Army to come in and become a police officer and give a kid a chance? And so I'm really grateful for the city because they gave me a job with some decent benefits. I was able to afford to go to Sac State and still pay for my rent. These are like very practical things that people need. And it was an environment of very supportive people, whether they were my direct supervisors, people that I worked with. And I always had this very encouraging and positive environment. And we were talking specifically about women in law enforcement. I think that that's a narrative that doesn't always exist. You hear about it's almost like we're heroes for making it up the chain. And I'm really cognizant of trying to make sure that people understand that I had a lot of support to get here. And so after 27 years getting to be your police chief. I think that says a lot about the city of Sacramento in general. I get to work with 15 other department heads. There's 16 of us total. We work for a handful of city managers, and there's a lot of women in that group. And so for a long time, our city has made efforts, and it's not just about making those efforts to attract people. It's really the culture that you have in your organization. Like, you can attract the best culture, best people, but if your organization really doesn't support inclusiveness, doesn't really promote what people need, understand like working moms have challenges, that people need to have, some flexibility in their schedules sometimes, and really value like the differences that we bring, you're not going to be successful no matter how great your recruiting programs are. But what I also know is that in order to be effective in those areas, we need to create pathways. And I'll give you an example. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, I was sitting at an academy graduation. So we have our candidates go through a 6-month academy graduate program, very, very difficult. And there are a lot of, unfortunately, potential pitfalls during that program. Our standards are very, very high. And so we tend to lose people during the academy process, and that's to be expected. But I was sitting in an academy graduation, they were talking about the number of candidates that had gone through the academy and who had actually graduated. We lost 40% of our candidates during an academy. And you have to understand that's after an extensive hiring, recruiting, hiring, background process. It takes about 6 months to get a candidate ready to go into the academy, and no organization can sustain that. And what we were finding, a couple of things. One, talking to the academy staff, that people definitely had the potential to become good police officers. They just weren't quite ready in a number of areas. And the feedback that we got was like, hey, if we just had another couple of weeks with this person, if we just could have prepared them better, we could have probably gotten them there. And when I started as a dispatcher. I was, that was not probably the job for me. I wasn't a great dispatcher, honestly. I'm very much more inclined to be out in the community, be outside. And I really give our dispatchers credit. It's National Telecommunications Appreciation Week, and I will be at the comm center, giving everyone, applause and support, because they do an incredible job. But I know that for me, I really like being outside and working with communities. And so they had a CSO, a community service officer position, way back in the day. When we went through our round of cuts in the city, the Great Recession of about 9, 10, 11, where we actually laid people off, one of the first things that we did in order to try and prevent a massive amount of layoffs, and we certainly had a considerable, was we deleted all of our vacancies and we eliminated some of our programs that were not essential to our core services. One of those programs was the Community Service Officer program. And that was a great pathway to prepare people to get into the profession of law enforcement. So when I was in personnel, and that's where all the hiring and recruiting takes place, I did a pitch to try and bring that position back. So the student trainee position, which is kind of like right out of high school, a paid internship program, and the community service officer program, we were able to bring back. And I'll tell you, the diversity in those programs is incredible. The challenge for me is that those are growing programs. They've been very successful over the last few years. It's still a small portion of our whole organization. And so to see wide scale wholesale change is going to take a while to get there. The other challenge that we had is when we did layoffs 10, 12 years ago, we laid off our most junior, youngest employees. And that was our most diverse group of employees. And so we lost a lot of diversity. So what you're seeing now is, yes, we're challenged just like everybody is with recruiting, but we have some great pathways to getting into law enforcement. So I think that we really, as an organization, one, got to create a culture that supports diversity, but two, give people a real opportunity. I know there's a lot of young men and women that want to get into law enforcement, and it's a great career. I think if this is the career for you, it's really the best job. But getting people to where they have the skill set that's needed in today's law enforcement environment, which is, you've got to be very mature. You have to be able to make split-second decisions. You've got to make crucial decisions very, very quickly. Those are all skills that we can develop in people, but it just takes a little bit of time. So for me, those are things that are really important, and it's been heartwarming to see, people that are interested in the department. It was kind of an unexpected thing by being the first female police chief. A lot of women come out and ask, and I guess I wasn't expecting that to be as prevalent as it was, but in a way, I'm glad that I can, sort of create that for people and say, yeah, you could be here too, right? And we can get you there. And so that has been hugely rewarding. One of the things that I wasn't really expecting.
Right. Very good. Ginger?
I'm curious about what you just said, that 40% of the people in the academy dropped out or weren't able. Where did they fail? What caused them to drop out?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down, there's two general areas that we see that are really difficult. And this makes me a dinosaur when I can talk about this. But if you go back, have you guys all been in Sacramento for a while, for the most part? So if you go back, Dan and I started about the same time. If you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a number of car accidents involving officers, and our training program here met the state standard. We were certainly above the state standard, yet we were still having these accidents. And so we really increased the amount of hours that our recruits spend driving. Driving is something that we do all the time, and we've got, there's a lot of things going on in the car. We are in an urban environment where there's a lot of things to distract you and potential hazards. And so we have put lots of extra time and requirements into driving because we don't want officers being involved in accidents. And we actually have made significant improvements over the years because of that training program. But I'm telling you, it's a very difficult training program to get through. So driving has been a challenge. It's kind of a reflection, honestly, this is my own 2 cents on this, a little bit of a reflection on our society. When I was a kid, like the first thing we wanted was to get our driver's license, right? And we're not maybe seeing that as much. People are waiting until they're 17, 18, 19 to drive. And so, whereas before, if we hired somebody at 21, 22, 23, they were probably driving 6 or 7 years before they started here. If we hire them at 21 or 22, maybe they've only been driving for a year or two, so they're inexperienced. So driving was one big challenge, Ginger. The other challenge was firearms, and our firearms training is difficult. We've improved it. That was one thing that I really appreciate. I have tiny little hands, tiny. And so I have a hard time holding like larger weapons. And this was one of the agencies that gave us they gave us alternatives. And so I was able to use a smaller gun going through the academy program. If they had put me into the gun that most everybody else used, I probably would not have passed the qualification. I could barely reach the trigger on it. And so these are accommodations that we can make. However, our training program is still really difficult. Obviously, I mean, driving and use of force, we really put a lot of work, and we have very high standards. So one of the things that we did to address that issue was, and this goes back to my Army time, if anybody was in the military, before they would send you to a really difficult course, they would typically do like a pre-training, or we call it the pre-academy. And essentially that was to do 2 things. One, to make sure that you were ready for the upcoming course of training, because the Army didn't want to send you away to training only to have you not pass and have to come back. And it took up somebody else's spot. And then if you weren't ready, we found a way to get you there. So one of the things that we've done is over the last couple of years, we create a pre-academy training, and it's almost mandatory for everyone entering our academy. Occasionally we'll have last minute hires that we put into the academy, but essentially they go through an extra month of training where we focus on those core skills. And the benefit is our success rate in the academy is much higher. The drawback is your 6-month academy just turned into a 7-month academy. But quite honestly, I would rather extend it and get people to meet the higher standard versus lowering a standard, or worse, having people not meet the program requirements. We are obviously looking to hire people and need them here, and I really want them to be successful. So those are some of the things we do.
Thank you. Several of us just heard your Capital Public Radio interview on Insight program about the horrendous mass shootings of early morning, April 3rd. Could you briefly give a summary of where this incredibly complex investigation is right now?
Yeah, sure. I'll couch that a little bit. So this is a really complex investigation. Very early on in this, we had a lot of social media video that was being shared, and I think that gave everyone kind of a good picture visually of what the officers were challenged with when they got there. I'd like to give credit to my team, first of all. We have an incredible group of very talented investigators that have been relentless on this case since it happened. We understand the significance that this has in our community, the impact to the victims and their families, and this has brought national attention, onto not only to our city, but the topic of gun violence. So very early on, I did some limited press with, and I'm sure you understand the position. We don't have a lot of information right after that morning. By that afternoon, we had developed more. We were able to put out more. And I'm trying to put out as much information as I can as we progress. So yesterday, we were able to share that we were looking for a fourth suspect. We have exhausted all of our leads and we're asking for the public's help. And I can tell you, I really appreciate the public's commitment to helping us with this. We were able to use some of our existing technology to open up a citizen portal. We've had over 205 submissions as of the other day of video, tips, and photographs. Now, all of those have to be analyzed. We brought some help over from our FBI partners with an analyst to actually, start working through those leads. But what I can tell you is that as we develop information, I'm trying to share that because I know people are interested and they want to know why this happened, how this happened. But I'm also very cognizant of the fact that at this point, the most significant thing that I can do to help the victims of this horrific crime is to really work on putting a good, viable case that has integrity for the district attorney. And so as we get information, we're trying to share that, but I'm also trying to make sure that we don't, have any problems with the case. And we're able to present facts and information to the district attorney that gives them the opportunity to, file the appropriate charges and really hold those responsible accountable. And Bruce, do you mind? They have a meeting going on next door. Do you mind if I close my door really quick? They're being
No,
loud.
please do.
Hold on a second. I'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry, we share a conference room and my door was open. I wasn't expecting a flood of people to come.
It's okay. It's all right.
Like you're not going to hear me in a minute and they're going to be loud. So
Are you okay? Are you okay now?
yeah, I'm good. They just closed
Okay.
I think they
All
saw my frustration and I was closed the door.
Okay. I liked your idea that you came with on insight on, I don't think I have the right word, but focus prevention. That is strategies to zero in on repeat offenders in neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And Captain Monk has already talked a bit about that. But what precisely are the methods of identifying and inhibiting those individuals from further violence?
Yeah, that's a term that you may hear other agencies use called focus deterrence. And towards the end of last year, we started seeing a significant increase in violent crime, especially gun violence, not just here in our city, but nationally. There is a group of other chiefs. There's a lot of work being done at the federal level that talk about best practices. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all model for cities, but it's things that as a police chief in a department that we need to examine to see, kind of how we're doing. The idea behind focus deterrence is that we know from extensive research that most violent crime is committed by a small group of offenders in very small geographic areas. And so the idea is to focus on prevention and intervention in those areas, work with the community and our community partners. And we have great community partners that are doing tremendous work, often goes unnoticed in our communities, and really have the ability to intervene in ways that we can't. And it's also to hold those accountable that are responsible for gun violence. So some of that comes into trying to get illegal guns off the street, working with our federal partners. But I'd like to, maybe I can use an example of kind of the difference between what we're doing now versus what we did. When Dan and I started a long time ago, if we had a significant uptick in crime or violent crime in an area, the deployment strategy was to flood the neighborhood with cops, like put a ton of people in a neighborhood, stop everybody, zero tolerance, everybody is held accountable. And in a way, you saw some positive effects. You did see a downward trend in overall crime. We made a number of arrests. We were able to confiscate and seize guns. And those are good things at reducing crime. Unfortunately, it had a very significant and disparate impact on vulnerable communities. And we create a lot of harm with that, and not really, like, the intention was not obviously to harm communities, it was to try and keep those communities safer. But when you have a one size fits all approach and you go out and decide that you're just going to, you're basically going to flood a neighborhood and not really understand the consequences of that, that's really harmful. And so the idea is that if we know we have a small group of people, why don't we just work with that group, and why don't we work with our community partners? The other thing is, there's a long and very complicated relationship with law enforcement, and especially communities within our city. And we have to work with those communities. They have to understand what we're doing, why we're out there, and how we want to move forward. So while we've been working on really changing our strategy over the last several months, you haven't seen like a big, presentation from the police department. We're not doing big press releases because this is really a long-term approach, and we need to get the community's buy-in. We need to get input from the community. We need to work within our communities and work within our providers. One of the things I love about Sacramento, quite honestly, is that we're a big city, but we're small enough that everyone kind of knows each other. I don't know about you guys, but I can't really go anywhere without running into somebody I know. That is a huge strength for us, whether we realize that or not. We're not in LA and New York and Philadelphia. They all have, their different strengths as well. But what I can say is, for us, we know a lot of people, we know a lot of providers. We really are a good community. And I stole this idea from Dr. Richard Hand. We were at a national night out, and he's done a lot of work in pediatric medicine and prevention and working in communities. And he says that you can look at communities one of two ways. One, look and see what they're missing, right? And where all the gaps are. Or you can look at communities and look at where their strengths are, and then find out how to work within those strengths and what resources they already have. Kind of like the glass half empty, glass half full approach. But I know we have the glass half full in a lot of areas. So we need to really work within what's working within those partnerships and look at the long-term strategy. So shorter term, there's definitely an enforcement component. You're never going to hear me not ask for additional resources and additional police officers, because I think that we have a really important calling. But I also think that we have to be very strategic, and we have to really look at it from a holistic point of view about how we're going to change the narrative. And, why do you have gang violence, and why do people resort to gun violence? And what are the challenges in communities that we need to address? If you've heard over the last few weeks, Dan Hahn, our former police chief, has done, I think, a really great job of talking about how once vibrant communities like Oak Park and Del Paso Heights were these thriving communities, and now they're not. And so what changed? What did we take out of those communities, and what do we need to put back in to, build healthy communities and healthy people again? So you'll hear me talk a lot about those things. Dan, actually, we have actually met with our community providers and our CBOs over the last few months to talk to them and really get their input. Like, hey, this is the problem that we see. How do you see? How do we work? What do you see the problem being? How do we work together? Just a few days before this horrific incident downtown, we had a meeting with all of our command staff to really talk about, what our strategy was and moving forward. So this is something that we've been working on for quite a while, and you will hear me talk about it. I'm very open about what the challenges are, and I'm very open about talking about disparities within our communities. And I think one way to really look at this problem is look at the victims, right? And look who's actually being victimized by gun violence. And that is hugely concerning. And so while we had this very significant incident downtown, I don't want people to forget that this happens in our communities all over the city, and that this is a huge challenge for us as a city.
Okay, I'd certainly like that holistic approach you're talking about. It seems to me the best way to approach what you're doing, law enforcement. Sacramento recently marked the 4-year anniversary of the death of Stephon Clark. What important changes to Sacramento police procedures have been put in place since then? And what additional changes do you still want to see?
That actually, and Dan is a great person to talk about this too, because prior to him being your South Area captain, he worked in the office of the chief. And so the Clark incident really changed us in a lot of ways. Number one, we have a foot pursuit policy. Number two, we invite a lot of outside partners to come and take a look at our policies, our procedures, and how we do things. And if you go to our transparency website, you'll see a number of things. You'll see the DOJ recommendations. There's phase 1 and there's phase 2. And actually, Captain Monk worked on these extensively because we were giving recommendations and we were really responsible for the implementation of those. And so we have a very much expanded use of force policy. We have put a lot of work into de-escalation. We're doing some, I think, some really advanced work with our training division. We've established an inspections and standards team where we review the constitutionality of arrests. And we're constantly looking to improve. What's been really interesting is that for us as an agency, I think we know where we need to go in law enforcement. One of the first things that you do is you look around at your fellow partners to see, like, well, who's already doing this? How did they release body worn camera? Like, where are the steps? How do we do that the right way? And we found that we are really trailblazers in a lot of areas. And so what you'll see is like a constant sort of evolution and redevelopment of policies as we learn more, as we find better practices, like our foot pursuit policy, our body worn camera policies. And I work very closely with the police commission, are sort of constantly evolving. Technology changes, needs change, things come up that you hadn't anticipated. So these are really living documents. And so I think probably one of the biggest outcomes is really, what is our change in thinking? And one, I want to recognize that, the Clark family lost a brother, a son, a grandson. It was a really tragic event for the family. We can't forget the families. And I think that's something that is imperative when we're talking about loss in our community. And while that incident was absolutely legal and within policy, just because something is legal doesn't mean that it sits well with the community. And so we have to recognize that and have to figure out how to move forward to do things that are absolutely the best for our community and meet the needs. And so a lot of it is that change of thinking. One of the outcomes, and whenever I talk about Mr. Clark, I always want to make sure that I talk about one of the positive things that came out of that. And the Clark family has worked very hard to establish a foundation that Dan works with pretty regularly, the Blessed Child Neighborhood Association. And that is a really neat group of people, primarily in the South area, that have come together and meet very regularly and make, some work to make improvements in their neighborhood. And I personally think that that's a wonderful thing for the family to have brought to our community from an incident that was very, very tragic for them.
Okay, thank you. My understanding is that the city manager appoints you, Kathy. Is that correct?
Yes, there was an extensive search, but ultimately it is the city manager's decision.
Okay, so you don't respond or you don't accountable directly to the city council, I assume. So that precedes the question. The Sacramento Community Police Reform Commission has publicly stated that the city council does not respond to their requests over the past several years. If you do support the commission's work, what will you do to make sure that your office's support reaches the city council?
So I'll kind of explain our role. So we have a city manager form of government here in Sacramento, which means a lot of the business side of things are done by the city manager's office. And then we have the elected side, which is the city council and the mayor. And there are a number of departments such as the office of the city attorney, the auditor's office that are within the purview of council, and they manage those offices, including OPSA, which oversees the commission. All boards and commissions are also run on the city council side of things. When it comes to the departments like Public Works, the police department, the fire department, we fall under the really the supervision, the authority of our city manager. So the Sacramento Police Commission, for those of you who have followed, this has been really an evolution of several forms of commissions, and started really with the Racial Profiling Commission, and it's evolved over the years to really its present form. We're really not even like mandated to attend, but I think that the work that the commission is doing is important. And so we have voluntarily attended those meetings, really tried to provide information, work with the commission. They are a voice of the community and bring forward things of concern, recommendations, and essentially the work of the commission is to be a recommending body to city council. Over the last several years, usually around December or January, they will have a series of recommendations that are brought forward to city council. What the city council is doing now, and this is following an extensive auditor's report that was released earlier this year, is there are a number of outstanding recommendations, and the direction has been to the commission to bring those back to city council for review in segments. And I'm not sure when the next segment is moving forward. When I moved into this position, I had to really kind of give up my role on the commission and assign that duty to one of our captains to continue to attend. But the idea is that they're going to take these recommendations back and discuss them at council and then make a decision on them moving forward. So it's really between the commission and also the council. If you read the auditor's report, I really like some of the recommendations and some of the things that we're trying to move forward to is like more of an official sort of vetting process for policies where we can publish that and show what the recommendations have been from the commission, and then what action the police department took, or what, you know, how we responded to that. Because a lot of what we've been doing has been in ad hoc meetings, it's not, or, you know, at the public forums. And I think there's a better way to do it. So there's some great recommendations from the city auditor that I think are really going to help do that. But there's certainly a commission that's working really hard. And as a matter of fact, I have a meeting set up with them here today to discuss a number of things. So I appreciate the work that they're doing, and it's certainly relevant to the work that we're trying to do. And we were talking about the importance of transparency and accountability. You know, transparency, I think, is really important because it shows us how to do things in a better way. So I try to be very transparent and provide information so they can make good decisions.
Thank you. Good.
I see.
Ginger, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions to ask you. One, just some statistics. How many officers do we have? How many are, you know, black, white? How many are people of color? And black, white, Asian, and female? And as a female officer, I'm really curious, do female officers behave differently than men officers? And are they more effective at de-escalating things than male officers? Sorry, Captain Dan, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I can, Ginger, I can get you the exact breakdown, give you some general numbers right now, but it changes, I mean, really week to week. So right now we're authorized for about 769 police officers. If you count the number of people that are in the academy or that have been pre-hired, you know, we have, you know, between 30 and 40 in that group. And essentially we're about 80 officers down if you don't include the group that's in training. And again, that changes week to week. So I can have our personnel office like send you the exact statistics regarding, and same thing with our diversity statistics. And they don't change too much over the time, but I'll get you the exact percentages of our pre-hires, you know, our pipeline programs, and then our overall diversity, because I'd like you to see both, because I think that tells a really important, it sends a really important message about our commitment to that. We just actually committed to an initiative called the 30 by 30 initiative. And the idea of that is to try and increase the diversity in police departments to 30% women by 2030. You will see in the fall that we're going to do a female fitness challenge. And we're really using the work that group has been doing to guide us as we recruit. And what I'm hoping is it doesn't only help recruit women, but it helps recruit everyone from a diverse population. You know, we don't sit around and just wait for people to walk in the door. First of all, we actively go out and seek candidates, and we have a number of programs that we do that for. What I like about the 30 by 30 initiative is that we have a lot of very smart people, researchers that have looked at diversity within law enforcement, public safety, government. And the first thing that they're going to do is do an analysis of what we're doing in a survey, and then give us recommendations. And if there's anything that we're not doing, I am more than open to trying it. I'll tell you what, because I think that we really do need to increase the number of women. There is, and part of that initiative is they do talk about having women in law enforcement and how we tend to be involved in fewer use of force incidents. We tend to be better able to de-escalate. And so those are important things. But I don't want to say that that's just women. For me, it's really important to have a very diverse group of employees, period, because we serve a diverse community with different needs. And it's important, one, that people see people that look like them, you know, that they feel safe around, and that we can actually, you know, provide services in a way where people trust us. And there's definitely research to show that when you're serving a community, that your organization needs to represent that community that you serve. And we're not where we need to be. Right now, I think our organization has about 17% women. At least when we, about a month ago when we ran the numbers, that's right where we were. So we're very close to that. And, but, you know, we also have to look at our promotional processes or testing processes, because as you climb the ladder in law enforcement, and this is true in a number of organizations, you see less and less diversity towards the top of your organization. Right now, only 3% of police chiefs nationwide are female. And so there's a big, you start to see really this gap as you move farther up the chain. And so that's a challenge, I think, for us just as a society. And there's a lot of things that go into that. You know, I was a single mom for a long time, and I had some opportunities to promote and move into different assignments. And I knew how difficult that was going to be for, you know, my family at the time. And could I actually do that? Or was I going to be, you know, not be a success? So I had to make some very hard choices. And quite honestly, the timing was right for me in a number of things. So my job is to make sure that we're giving, you know, women the support that they need. You know, women are different because we tend to hire them in their prime years when they become mothers, and that's not just in law enforcement, but it can impact women and their ability to promote within organizations. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to encourage women in particular to take those chances to be at the table and to offer a voice. I'm really glad I've had an opportunity to really rebuild our leadership team here. We had a number of retirements at the end of the year, and being able to bring new people in and really increase diversity at all ranks has been a goal of mine. I'm happy to be able to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
And you know, I'm sorry, I actually had a meeting that started about 15 minutes ago, but you were asking such good questions. I didn't want to leave. I can answer, you know, another couple of questions, but then I don't want to keep the other group waiting too much longer.
Well, I think I would stop there, actually.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing as a sign off. Thank you both for being here. In particular, Chief Lester, there is so much good energy in your voice. I just love it. You don't seem beaten down, you know, over the last 25 years. And I just wanted to say that I wish you all the best going forward. Don't let the job get to you. Of course it will. But I hope you can come back and meet with us in a year and have that same energy and enthusiasm. I mean, there's something that in my world we call the child's voice. And I don't mean that critically, but it means that you have that innate curiosity and determination and activism of a child. And I see that in you. And I just hope you'll be able to continue to bring all your good ideas to our police department and keep growing as a person. I see you've got a lot on your plate, not just with work, but you've got a family of teenagers. That can't be easy. And who knows what else you're doing. But thank you for being here and for being our police chief. And we look forward to the next several years working with you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. And I guess, you know, you have a choice in life. You can be an optimist, or you can look at everything that's wrong around you. And I try and be a perpetual optimist. I think it's a force multiplier. That's what Colin Powell says anyway. But I think it says a lot when you're leading a team, you know, that there's a lot of stuff that can bring you down. But I think there's a lot of good that we do in our community. And we need to focus on creating more of that and being positive. And I'm actually really looking forward to the opportunity to do some things in a different way. If we haven't learned over the last few years that we do need to, you know, move forward and do it in a different way, then we haven't really been paying attention. So I really appreciate the work of the group here and for giving your time, because I know you guys are all really volunteering to be here just to listen to me. So I thank you for your interest in what we do and for your support of the department. And I look forward to coming back and seeing you. And Ms. Rutland, I will absolutely get you the stats. I just don't want to misquote, but I will get those sent over. I know we've got a contact, so I'll get those.
Yeah,
out.
if you could send them to us as well, that would be useful.
Absolutely. All right. Have a wonderful
Thank
day,
you,
everyone.
Kathy.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.